previous webinar, we actually created a list report. You can see on the left of my screen here the list report that we created last time. Last time I also talked to you how well designed ForNAV is for NAV, for NAV. ForNAV understands NAV design patterns. ForNAV allows you to print addresses without using the address formatting coordinate, and it's very easy to create quick reports in the ForNAV report designer. Today we're going to take it a little bit further. Some of you asked about it already last time in the webinar. How easy is it, or how fast is it to create a document report like a sales invoice? So today we're going to create a sales invoice from scratch, from nothing. And we're going to do that using trans headers, trans footers, everything you always want in a report. And we're actually going to do the same with a credit memo, and we're going to keep those documents in sync after we have created it. I'm going to do that on the preview of ForNAV version 2. Currently, if you go to our website, if you go to the partner place and to the product download part, in the product download you can actually have the option to download the release candidate, and some of the features I'm going to use today only work in that release candidate. We're currently wrapping up the release. We're expecting to release ForNAV version 2 very soon. Hopefully you will be able to get this up and running at your customers quickly. If you want to watch the previous webinar, you can find it on the YouTube channel. This is the YouTube channel of ForNAV. You can see that already more than 200 people has watched me present the list report last time. So without further delay, let's start creating this sales invoice. You can see in my demo database, I still have the list template that we created in the last webinar. And we're going to start with firing up the ForNAV Designer. The new report, we're going to start from the ForNAV Designer. And we can do that because the ForNAV Designer is connected to the SQL Server database that contains the NAV objects. We can check this in the Settings tab. In the Settings tab, we can see that I'm currently using this build of ForNAV, which is actually a little bit older than you have in the download right now. And if I go to the NAV tab, you can see that I'm connected to my demo database, and it's connected to the FinSQL. .exe. We need that because we need a reference to the compiler, and the compiler is wrapped into the development environment. So this allows me to create a new header line report. Last time we used a new list report. We're going to create a new header line report. And you can see that just like with the list report, we are not starting with nothing. We're starting with a template that contains the company information. That's something that we almost always need when we print a report in NAV. And then we have a header table and a line table. And in this case, the header table is the sales invoice header, and the line table is the sales invoice line table. You can also see we have the picture from the company information. We have the address information. We have the bill to address from the sales header. I'll get back to that during the webinar, but this is actually using the ForNAV address formatting engine, not the one built into NAV. And you can also see that we actually print the report name, which is important in this webinar scenario. I'm going to save this report in NAV, and I don't want to overwrite the last report, so I'm going to create object number 50001, and I'm going to select as a name sales invoice. The name is important in this scenario because the name is the one that's going to be printed on the report. So I'm not going to select something silly like demo report, it's sales invoice. Now we can say save object in NAV, and that will actually store the report directly in the NAV database. Let's close this one. And now if I go into my object designer, I can see that the sales invoice is there. It's compiled, and I can just immediately start running it from there. Now I can see that I can also open it in the designer from the Windows client. We'll do that just in a minute after we have executed the preview. And when I preview the report, I can see that the header is already printed quite nicely. I can see that I'm using the trial version. You can do everything with ForNAV without actually buying a license. It will just show this trial version tag. And you can get rid of this by getting a customer license, which is actually reflected to the NAV license, which is running on the service tier. So let's close this guy and run it again. And in this time, we're going to hit the Open Designer tag. This tag only opens up if you actually have the designer installed. If you don't have the designer installed, this flag will not show, so you don't have to be afraid that someone is going to actually change your report layout and change the bank account information to something else if they don't have access to doing that. So now we are back into the ForNAV report designer. You can see that on the bottom we have a body, and the body currently shows number and description. I don't want to show just that, I want to show it in just a different way. So I'm just going to delete these data items, and first I'm going to add some data items that we always need if we print invoices. I'm just going to insert a trans header and a trans footer, and I'm going to insert a header and a footer for the entire section as well. Those are the typical data sets that we need for invoices, and then I'm going to all give them the same size, just holding down my Control key while selecting them, and then I can set the height for all of them to 150, which create a nice plain design field for me that I can start using. The next step is I want to actually put in the fields that I'm going to use. So let's go to the field list. If I expand the field list on the line data item, I can see that I have all the fields from the sales line, just like you had in the classic report designer. If I go to the NAV object designer, and if I just quickly design this report, you can see that I actually don't have any columns in my report. ForNAV doesn't need the columns. We're just directly reading the data from the data that NAV is bringing forward from SQL Server without actually using the XML that Navision typically generates for RDLC. This is also one of the reasons why ForNAV is so much faster than RDLC. So let's select the fields that we want to print on the invoice, and we're going to do that in the order that we want to display the fields on the invoice. So I'm first going to select the number field, then the description field, holding down the Control key again. Then I want to display quantity. Fields are displayed alphabetically, so it's quite easy to find them. Going to print the units price, and then last but not least, going to print the amount. Customers would like to see what amount they owe us. So now I'm going to drag that on the body of the report, and you can see it actually creates a table control directly from the field list using the fields in the order that I have selected them. Now I can actually also set the style. I can use the same style as I used last time. I can actually print the even columns in a different color than the odd rows. I always like doing that. This is such a hassle in RDLC, and it's so easy in ForNAV to do this. I'm just going to print them Gains Pro. The next step is I want to actually show the header fields. ForNAV is also bringing in the field captions. They are automatically translated if I print the invoice in a different language for another customer. So I can simply go into my field captions and then search again for my number field. Let's see if I remember my alphabet. Then I go to the description, holding down the Control key, going into quantity, going into unit price, and then going into amount. I actually asked Michael if he could actually do this automatically. If typically what you want to do is after you have created a body, you want to create a header, so it will be even faster in the future if he has implemented that suggestion. Now I'm going to change the color to blue. Customers always want their invoices to be printed in blue, so I'm going to respect that choice. And then I'm going to change the borders to all borders, and I'm going to change the width to 2 pixels. So now I have a nice header control that I actually want to copy to my trans header. So now let's select this guy, hit Ctrl C, hit Ctrl V, arrow down. So now I have my trans header showing the same information. The next step is customers want to have the running totals on the trans header and the trans footer, and we can simply do that by dragging in the amount field into the trans header. And of course I want to print a text called continued. The ForNAV report designer is built with ERP documents in mind, so we have a lot of standard captions built into the product, and one of the standard captions that we have is the continued caption, and I simply drag in the continued caption and it will automatically print continued in English, and it would print vervolg in Dutch or something Danish that I don't know in Danish. The next step is I also want to print the amount on the footer. I don't have to drag in the control again. I can simply select the control, hit down my control on the keyboard, and then you can see that we have the little plus sign showing up, and I can actually create a copy of the control without going back to the data set. And now, of course, I want this to show subtotal, and now it will actually print subtotal when I create this invoice. The next one is I want to be able to print the total amount and the total amount including sales tax. I'm going to do that again by dragging in the fields, this time from the header. Going to drag in the amount field, and I'm going to drag in the amount including VAT. And then I go back to my standard captions and I drag in excluding sales tax and including sales tax. Of course, I also want to see the total sales tax amount. So I'm going to copy this control, holding down the arrow key, the control key, sorry. And then I simply go into the properties. I can go to the properties in the big property window, but the most popular properties are actually displayed using the small arrow window here. I can directly go to the source expression, and I can actually say I want to deduct the header dot amount, and in this case it's going to deduct the amount from the sales header. The next step is I'm going to go into my label control. In this version of ForNAV we don't have the caption tax amount built in. We're going to do that in a future version, but currently you have to drag in text control, and I can simply create multi-language captions. I don't have to do that in my NAV development environment. I can simply do that in ForNAV, and I can simply say sales tax amount, and I can add one in Dutch, and I can say BTW bedrag, and it will display something in Dutch as well. Okay, so now we have those controls, And now we actually have pretty much everything that we need to create the sales invoice. We can save it to the database. And now we can actually preview it directly from the designer. We can do that because we started the designer from an instance of the Windows client. So it actually has a reference to the Windows client that I started it from. And if I now preview the report, it will fire up the report. It won't show the designer again because I don't want any nested designers. But now I can actually print the invoice without starting it from the object designer. It prints my header, it prints my line information, it prints my total amount, excluding tax, including tax, and my sales tax amount. The standard Kronos database doesn't have big demo invoices, as you may know. So if I go to my last page, I'm actually showing the subtotal amount. We do have a small bug in this build that's fixed in a newer build that still shows page 1 of 1, which is actually not true. We had some of the attendees in this morning's webinar finding that for us. But actually this shows the subtotal amount, and then I dragged in the amount caption. This is my bad. I actually have to delete this one, and go back to my line, and I'm going to do that using the field, of course. Do the same thing again, copy the field, save the report, preview the report, and go to the last page. And now you can see it actually shows the continued amount, right, from the running totals. Okay, so let's make this report a little bit more interesting. Let's see if we can add some other elements to this report. The first thing I want to show is the currency that is currently being used for this document. Normally, printing currency codes can be a challenge in NAV because the way we do standard setup in NAV is that the local currency code is always blank. And then you actually have to write some CEL code to print the correct currency code. ForNAV recognizes that, and we can actually go into the header, and we have something we called field lookups. And field lookups allow you to get things like a location name or a currency code from tables that are using the supplemental table design pattern. So let's go in and let's actually print the currency code. And let's, for the fun of it, also try to print the location name, just to see if that prints anything like a description. The next thing I also want to do is I want to make some changes that normally would require some coding in CAL. I actually want to print my address uppercase. The address in this case is a member of the company information, and in the company information I have the normal address fields like address, address to, county, country code. But in this case I have actually used the field groups. We have the field group address, which is actually directly printing a formatted address without going into code unit 365. In this case, I want to print my address in uppercase. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to actually change this source expression. And source expressions in ForNAV allow you to do JavaScript. So some of you who are maybe familiar with JavaScript know that in order to print uppercase, you have to say to uppercase. And the letter U and the letter C is in uppercase. You have to close it with parentheses. JavaScript is case sensitive. They will actually fail if you forget to do the C in uppercase. So this is the JavaScript syntax for printing something in uppercase. And let's also make it a bit more interesting. Let's go into my image control. And in my image control, we are actually going to say, I only want to print this image if the customer number is not equal to customer 10,000. We can do that using the show output. The show output is currently set to true, which is also JavaScript. And I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to reference to my data set. And I'm going to say if my bill to customer number, if that number does not equal 10,000, in this case I want to show or hide my my bitmap. So let's save this again, and let's review this report again. And now you can actually see that my address is uppercase, my currency code is euro, and my location code is actually saying magazine blue, which is Dutch for the blue warehouse. And I don't have to write any code in order to retrieve that. And you can also see that it actually hides the image if the customer is not customer number 10,000. So this actually illustrates that I can actually do pretty much complicated business logic without going into CEL. So let's go and see how we can actually make the copy printing work. In the last webinar, I showed you that we can automatically print the word copy if we run a copy of the report, but that didn't really make a lot of sense in the list report. So let's see how that actually works in the document report. Let's drag in the standard caption copy. Let's make it a little bit bigger, and let's make it bold, let's make it red, let's make it stand out, let's make it big. Let's really show that we're looking at a copy of an invoice here. And then the next thing is we're going to print not one but 2 copies of the report. If we now save the report in NAV, and we can actually run the report again, and let's filter on our report on the sales invoice that had the number of pages. We can actually see that we have an extra copy, and the copy text is printed only on the copy, not on the original. Okay, so this is a nice sales invoice. Let's make one change to this. We're actually going to remove this copy. I don't want this to stick in my report. I'm actually going to remove that to the default value. And let's actually save this one. So the next thing that we typically do as NAV developers or consultants is we agree with the customer that this is our sales invoice, and then we also want the sales credit memo to look the same. Sales invoices and sales credit memos in NAV are stored in different tables, but the design pattern of that is the same. And we also have the transfer fields in NAV, which kind of forces us to have those tables completely in sync. Whatever fields we have on the sales invoice, we have on the sales credit memo, and vice versa. In the classic report designer, what I used to do when I wanted to create a sales credit memo is I exported my report to a text file, and then in my text file I actually did find and replace to make sure that we're actually looking at the credit memo. In ForNAV, this is a lot easier. In ForNAV, we can actually design the report. We can say File, Save As, and we actually go and change this to 50,002, and we call it Sales Credit Memo. This will also change the text of the invoice to Sales Credit Memo. And we actually change this guy to 114 and this one to 115. And now we've actually created a sales credit memo. If I run this guy from the development environment and I look at the results, I can actually see that now I have 4 credit memos, and it uses the same business logic as my sales invoice. Everyone is happy, we can go live, the sales credit memo is looking the same as the sales invoice. But then over time, the inevitable happens, right? We want to change the sales invoice. We get new envelopes, and the envelopes have the window on the other side, or in this case, let's say that my customer wants to print their sales invoices in green. I don't know why you actually ever wanted to have your sales invoices in green, but let's say that in this scenario we actually want to have green sales invoices. So let's make it green, let's make it bold, let's make it really stand out that we are a green company. And now if we save this into the object, we can run the report again, and no surprise, it's going to print a green header. And of course, a good NAV developer will say, do you have any other reports? And then try to figure out which other reports actually use the same layout. And then we are applying something which is common to NAV, which in my master classes I call code cloning, right? We're actually going to copy this stuff around. This is because NAV is not object-oriented, and we cannot actually have superclasses that we inherit from. But this changes with ForNAV, right? With ForNAV, we can actually do that. With ForNAV, a report can inherit properties from a master report. In this case, I'm going to create a master report from my sales invoice. Maybe it would be better as best practice to have a master document with all my master sections. But in this case, I'm going to say my sales invoice is going to be my master report, my superclass. And I'm going to go into my layout and I'm going to say this header is not just header 1. This is a special header. This is a master Jedi, no header, master header, master header. And I'm going to inherit from this. So the next step is I can go into my credit memo, and the credit memo has to learn from the master Jedi. So I go into my layout, and in my layout I'm going to say this is not a normal header, but this is actually referring to report 50,001, and I want the master header to be used. If I do this, the controls get to be yellow. This means that it doesn't make sense for me to change this anymore. Whatever is here is just inherited from the master section. I'm doing this in this header, but I can do it in every other section. I can do it for every other iteration in this report as well, so that actually whenever I do a change in my sales invoice, it will also reflect to my credit memo as well. So let's save this report and run it to see if it actually works. Let's see if Murphy is deciding to stay away from my demos today. Yes, it actually worked, right? So now my sales credit memo is also printing in the nice color of green.
ForNAV is here to help you with reports. We are ready to talk. Are you?